Hi, David. So we thought that it would be good to have a chat, given that the government's highlighted, and we've just had the announcement of the new lockdown, and the government has been saying about how the this lockdown is obviously different to the previous one. Because we've got the hope of the vaccine, which we didn't have before. And also that's been kind of phrased as a way out of the pandemic, or at least of the lockdown. And so I suppose we've been thinking about, well, I've been thinking about workplaces and how the vaccine rollout will be aligned or enable some kind of return to work or return to campus. And how that will work, really, and to start thinking about that. So it's just good to have a chat.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me to join you in that. I think there's not going to be a sudden switching on of the lights and a mass return to campus. I see that Boris Johnson has described it as being no big bang, but a gradual unwrapping.
Yes, today was not.
Yeah, so I think that means that we shouldn't expect a sudden mass return to campus when, for example, a certain percentage of the population are inoculated with the vaccine. I don't pretend at all to be as expert on the science, of course not, but I don't think that anyone expects that to happen. I think it's much more likely that what we'll see is a gradual return to something like normal campus life for universities. Obviously, we're all aware of the priority lists that the government has set out for those who will get the vaccine. And as someone who's recently reached the magic age of 50, I fall into category number 9. So just
Lucky
about
you.
That's one of the new advantages of reaching that age. But it may also be relevant to look at organizational need for individuals to return to work, of course, and the vaccine is going to be one of the factors in those conversations. So as you said, we thought it would be helpful to talk about some of the practical steps to be thinking about as universities plan ahead for what we hope will be something like a return to normality.
Yeah, and I suppose it's similar to the return to work generally when it happened last time, deja vu. In terms of informing and encouraging staff in a subtle way, it needs to be the first point, doesn't it? The first approach, and probably from prior to mid-February, if we're hoping, we'll obviously know more as the weeks go on, closer to that. But if we're hoping that there will be some wind down of lockdown from mid-February onwards, then it's worth thinking about and planning for the return to work, and obviously dependent on what the government's position is with return to work, and also in relation to universities and face-to-face teaching, directly with staff, and using unions and staff networks to communicate with them. And also, I suppose staff are accessing information in different ways at the moment, aren't they? They're at home. Some universities have got apps to communicate, so using those. And also some, I suppose it's not to miss the advantage and the luxury perhaps that universities have in terms of they've got access to clinicians often if they've got medical schools. So if they can access and have them some joint communications, I suppose, with virologists or experts, that's likely to have more weight, isn't it? I suppose than just leadership alone in terms of encouraging people to have the vaccine and informing people about the scientific side of it beyond just the government and the briefing and the information that individuals will be having themselves, but making it tailored to the university. I think that needs to be the starting point, doesn't it? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. And in conjunction, as universities have been doing before, last term, for example, in conjunction with local health authorities and the like, making sure that, as you say, it's a communication that is a communication program that is tailored to the individual situations of the university. Because although we're all in the same position at the moment, I imagine that the situation that we're in at the moment won't replicate itself, and that we'll all suddenly be in a different tier where we can all start easing back. I'd imagine there'll be regional variations. So it does need to be a bespoke communication strategy, I think.
Yeah. And then I suppose it's drilling down into the individual circumstances, like we did previously, and considering the individual circumstances against the organisation's need, because people are going to have different views about it, aren't they, and different feelings about it.
They are, and I think you can envisage a couple of ways in which issues might arise as grounds for employees raising concerns about vaccination. Vaccination is only going to be one of the, I mean, it's the critical tool, of course, but it's only going to be one element of the conversation, obviously. But I can imagine two main issues that might arise as grounds for employees raising concerns about the vaccination that might engage Equality Act issues. And the first, of course, is if there are medical reasons why an employee might have concerns about the vaccine. That might be to do with the effects of the vaccine on them, particularly because of a particular physical impairment, or it might be a point you raised with me in an earlier discussion of concerns about travelling to receive the vaccine. That could also be an issue, and of course that could all engage considerations under the disability strand of the Equality Act, specifically the duty to make reasonable adjustments. And then I suppose the other thing that might be an Equality Act issue in relation to this particular part of the conversation about returning to campus might be people's individual beliefs about the vaccine.
Yes,
that could, I guess, Siân, be engaged in a number of ways. I was thinking, for example, it could be that certain people have fears about the safety of the vaccine because it's been done more quickly than normal. Most people,
religious beliefs as well.
Could be religious beliefs. I suppose the fact of fear about its safety could indeed be something that's relevant to certain employees with mental health impairments, mental health issues, that this adds to perhaps anxiety, for example. That might be a reason why an employee might not want to have the vaccine. And as you say, it could just otherwise be a principled belief that they shouldn't have the vaccine, whether that's on religious grounds, principal political grounds, or even grounds in relation to the way in which the vaccine has been developed.
And I think ultimately, I suppose it's about encouraging the individual both through the wider communication and having those individuals' discussions to try and reassure them. And then I suppose if you can't, if they are refusing to come to work, if they're refusing to have the vaccination, then it's a discussion as to what arrangements might be able to be made in terms of their role. I suppose ultimately I'm struggling to see there'll be a circumstance. It will be difficult, I think, to justify it being a requirement or being mandatory to get somebody to have the vaccine prior to returning to work. I think so. That would be a challenge to justify, and I think you'd have to take into account the individual role, wouldn't you? And it might be more at the other end of the spectrum in terms of being able to be justified if they're frontline staff or if they're clinical academics, for example. But I think it would not be without risk, let's put it that way, if you were going to take some action if somebody was refusing to have the vaccine, and that would mean that they were unable to come to work. Particularly, I suppose, because at the moment the vaccine hasn't been approved for pregnant people, so there'd have to be some arrangements and adjustments for those who are pregnant, and there may be justified medical reasons. So there's a fundamental thing is if you're doing it for those, so why can't you do it for me because of my health anxiety or because of some other reason why I'm refusing, even if it's just the principle or that my concern about the way it's been developed. But I mean, it reminds me of the importance of risk assessments again, which seems like a while ago where we were talking about the individual risk assessments and taking the individual approach. But I think that's important to consider, isn't it, given the multifaceted factors that would need to be taken into account.
Without doubt. I think, as you've indicated, dialogue is going to be crucial, and looking at alternatives for individuals where you've probed their particular concerns, whatever they may be. And it's a point for a discussion on another day, on another occasion. But of course, home working in many instances has been well tried and well tested, and found to work in many instances now. And so certainly, for many university roles, you can absolutely see the case for the return to campus in due course being essential. But that won't necessarily be the case for all university roles for all of the time. And so that sort of broader developing picture, I think, will no doubt be part of being reasonable and flexible in terms of discussions with individual employees where home working is properly tolerable in the long term.
And acknowledging those that have never actually left campus, whether it's security staff or facilities that have always, their role requires them to be on campus.
Yeah.
The other flag, again, probably another discussion on another day, is data, I suppose, if you're requiring information about people's medical situation. If they have been vaccinated, are you requiring some evidence of that before them returning to work? But lots of things to think about, aren't there, that we could talk about for much longer, I'm sure.
There are, but I think it's good to have these sort of thoughts. Although universities have got so much to cope with, to have them early, yes, and to be thinking about how these kinds of conversations might be handled when they arise, which they will.
Yeah, good to talk.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.